and welcome to the Penta Pod. I'm Dave Perry, I'm CEO of Penta Technology, and today we have Mark Hipperson, who's CEO of Ziglu.
Hi Dave.
Hi. So Mark and I actually go back quite a few years, it's fair to say. I think we met at Barclays.
We did in the late 90s, early noughties, yeah.
Absolutely.
When I grabbed you from BZW as it was at the time.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, wasn't it? I mean, we've done a lot since then, but I think more recently, you've done Starling before Ziglu. Tell me about Starling.
Yeah, so I founded Starling in 2015 along with the founding team. Really good group of people. We took advantage of the fact that regulators over here, the FCA, wanted to put a bit of challenge into the banking system. People weren't really switching accounts because you don't across the road to go from Barclays to Lloyds because it's as bad as each other, despite us working at Barclays before. So we know from the inside how bad they can be. Should I say that? I don't know, but I said it anyway. So what I think regulators wanted to do is put a bit of challenge into the system. And it's very difficult to get a banking license. So the EBA, the European Banking Authority, empowered the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, and the PRA, the Prudential Regulatory Authority, which is part of the Bank of England, to provide sort of fast-pass banking licenses. So, as you know, we took advantage of that, and we had a really brilliant team of people that worked hard for sort of 6-9 months to work through the process of understanding what was required and draw up the papers for the banking license. We sought investment funding, which we ultimately got from Harry McPike, of course, which is well publicised. But I was a CTO, so my job was to design, build, and implement the banking infrastructure. So that was
100% cloud, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were the first cloud-native bank, ever. So that was tough in itself, convincing the regulators that it was the safe thing to do. Production bank running in the cloud, when at the point in time there was no other bank, was quite a rare thing to do. So it was tough to try to make sure that everyone was comfortable with what we were doing. And
was that your sort of major challenge, do you think, in actually getting the first bank in the cloud? When the regulators, it was so new for the regulators. I remember the guidance coming out.
Yeah.
And it was the first time we were actually able to say the core part of the bank could be in the bank. Was that the biggest challenge for you?
It was a big part of the challenge, to be fair. Yeah. So there was a guidance paper in November 2015. Because I remember at the time, you might be aware, there was a few banks just before us that launched under the new regime. There was Atom, there was Tandem, there was Oak North. Oak North was in the cloud, but they used Mambu as design themselves. And then there was ourselves, and straight behind us there was Monzo, as you might be aware. Monzo was called back then. And then, Revolut built their own banking platform, but it's not a bank, so it's got an e-money license like Ziglu has now, of course. But to try to build that from scratch in the cloud was quite tough. So it's building a banking ledger, but importantly, all the API connections to the range of third parties. That was tough. But getting it configured right, so it was resilient, it was stable, it could scale to what's turned out to be now millions and millions of customers, and be highly performant and highly secure. That stuff was pretty tough to do. Not only that, to be able to do it, but to convince a regulator that it worked all the time. It would be reliable. It wouldn't fall over. It would calculate interest correctly. It would ensure transaction integrity from multiple different sources, from cards, from payments, from faster payments, from SEPA, from SWIFT, all that. That was tough, getting all that to work in real time.
So of course today you've got a new challenge, and I think it's I think at the moment we're celebrating, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I'm pleased. I'm pleased we recently got our FCA e-money license, which is fantastic. But harder than that was the 5MLD registration. So the fifth money laundering directive registration process was really tough with the FCA because we do crypto as well as sort of mainstream sort of current account type stuff that the challenges do. So we do crypto as well, and there's a whole new registration process for that. That was really tough, really onerous, and the bars are really high on that. But what we've done here, and what Ziglu does, is just I know you know, but for everyone's benefit, is a new challenger that does everything.
Hang on. So are you saying you're another challenger bank?
No, well, we are a new challenger, but we're not allowed to call ourselves a bank because we're not a bank. We're regulated as an e-money company, which is different in terms of legislation, which means we have our money with a bank. But to all intents and purposes, it allows you to be able to do all the things you can do with a regular challenger bank. So you get a sort code, account number, IBAN, your fiat currency there. But we also do FX, and we also do crypto as well. So you can hold multiple different crypto, buy, sell, hold, send and spend. So we can do peer-to-peer payments in both fiat and crypto, faster payments in the UK. And we also allow you to be able to, in just a few days' time, you'll be able to do MasterCard debit payments for any currency.
And dare I say, if we think about sort of where we started at Barclays, and we were spending millions at Barclays, and then obviously with your latest organisation, what we've been able to do, using cloud, etc. Going through Starling, okay, it's hundreds of millions to maybe tens of millions to maybe the single millions here. And technology's changed. Is it technology? Is it cloud? What's made the difference here?
Yeah, so cloud's been a big enabler for us to do things quicker, but also run things very efficiently. So what it's enabled us to be able to do is, and I remember having conversations at the time with the regulators to say, when I was at Starling, that we can do this in a traditional data centre, but it costs us literally 4 or 5 times as much. We don't want to do that.
Right.
And actually, it's not as secure. I can put in security, but out the tin from AWS, as we used back then, we're on Google Cloud now. But AWS was really secure. Look how much AWS spent on their security, far more than any bank globally. Therefore, why wouldn't you want to use a cloud provider that puts all that focus on security? In terms of run costs, it was a lot better. But also just the overall provisioning of the systems and speed and doing it really simply at your laptop was so straightforward, so simple to do. But I say that it was simple to do, but there's still lots of challenges in doing it, of course. So a lot of the focus is I know you want to talk about is the cloud elements of what we've done, which is pretty cool. We're proud of what we've been able to do, because what we've done is another sort of banking platform in the cloud, but we've integrated with multiple different FX providers and multiple different crypto providers to give you the best price crypto in real time. But in addition to that, we've integrated KYC, AML, we've integrated to banks where your money will sit, your fiat currency.
Is that via open banking?
Yep. And you have to nowadays. So it's all open banking APIs, all connected to the bank ledger or the ledger, the database ledger that we build ourselves. And a lot of that's quite tough to be able to do some of that sort of stuff, and getting all the security correct. I mean, as we know, AWS and Google, and I guess Azure, I've not used Azure personally, they've got a lot of good security built in to the platforms and stacks.
So you have to configure it. So the issue I've heard on many occasions is the cloud providers are great. They provide lots of infrastructure components, but you still got to orchestrate it. Although in the old days when we used to do the traditional infrastructure, you get somebody going in there and racking and stacking your routers and servers and things like that. But though you can do it electronically now, you still need to do the same process. So the complexity is still there. Now you can use automation tools for that, but do you see it as still a challenge for you?
Absolutely. So the reason why we've been able to do what we've done is because we've got a degree of expertise of doing it.
Right.
And we've done it before. But if we hadn't done it before and we didn't know what to do, it would be really difficult. Because it is difficult, as you say.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Loads of people can say, well, okay, I can do cloud. It's very straightforward. They rock up a few servers and say, well, there you go, it's the cloud. But they've kind of missed the point, haven't they? It's about the security. It's about the non-functional sort of resilience. It's about the scalability. Everything you need to do to make sure that your applications are available, scalable, and secure. That takes some effort.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the difference between running a true bank grade infrastructure and putting up an app that does something on App Store. It doesn't really matter if it's down for a few minutes. You can't be down for a few minutes if you're a bank, or you're in the press if you are. So there's the degree of resilience and robustness you need end to end in everything that you do. So having that there is really important. But at the same time, you can throw money at it and have lots of redundancy. We've got what's called Chaos Monkey working in production. You know what that is.
Oh yeah. I've used Chaos Monkey before.
Yeah, so we do that just to make sure constantly. And well, do you want to make sure make sure everyone knows what Chaos Monkey is? Go on.
Yeah, okay. So basically, you run Chaos Monkey in your infrastructure, and it randomly deletes things like servers for you. There's also Chaos Gorilla, which will actually delete whole, data centers for you. So to have a really resilient system, it's always good to run a type of software that can mimic random failures. That's basically what Chaos Monkey does for you.
Yeah, so it's exactly that. So we've got our running in production, and obviously on our test environments as well. So it's always simulating failure, therefore always recovering from failure. So when we do get a real failure, it's just another thing that can be overcome.
But you've got a huge reliance on very skilled engineers to be able to do all this kind of work.
We have, and trying to find those skilled engineers is difficult. And one of the big problems of building a technology company, and we're a technology company first and foremost. So we're pretty good at hiring techies.
You classify yourself as a fintech sector.
Yeah, well, a technology business that does finance. Yeah. So I was going to say banking, but
you're not allowed to say banking.
Not allowed to say banking. So it's a technology business that does finance, and we are, but very, very few companies. I think I've heard it a few times before from banks pretending that they're really technology companies, but they're not. They're banks. So we're a technology company, and we find it hard to find good quality engineers that really understand this. So it's difficult if you're not really.
And is it difficult to actually understand what a good quality engineer actually is? Because it's a massive specialism, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, it is, and very few people have done it. So you can count a number of people who've done the types of thing that we need them to do on maybe 2 or 3 hands, and globally that is in terms of building a banking platform from scratch in the cloud. So it's tough, yeah. So if you want to try and do anything like that, really, then finding the right people is tough. And
it's all about people at the end of the day, isn't it? Unless you can actually use a piece of technology that basically allows you, say, to create your banking environments in the cloud, then you are just reliant on really good people that are difficult to find and can be quite expensive as well.
Yeah, and you can't afford to make any mistakes either. So you've got to find people at the top end of the learning curve is the preference, of course, and then how do you know how good they are compared to somebody else? So companies that provide this type of service now that can are quite useful, I guess.
So I know you and I have been to see a few of the suppliers in the banking sector and done a little bit of due diligence on them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a little bit surprising that some of those suppliers don't offer high availability because they're using traditional infrastructure.
Mm.
So has that been a challenge to you that although you're using cloud yourself, you're highly resilient, highly scalable and highly secure, what happens when one of your partners it doesn't achieve the same standard as you?
That's a real problem. It's a real problem. So there's a few banks, I won't mention them, but they know who they are, who've written out certain suppliers because those suppliers have not had the same approach to resilience and robustness and redundancy.
Mm.
And even now, if you look at each of our suppliers, we push back quite hard on some of them and saying, really, in this day and age, you don't do that? So it's a really important point actually, and we're helping our suppliers to understand what they need to do to evolve their own environments to make sure that they continue to be a partner of ours.
I do remember going and seeing one supplier, and again I won't mention who it was, and we had to tell them what auto-scaling was.
Mm.
That was a little bit surprising for me. And now obviously, Ziglu not only understands it, but has implemented auto-scaling. But to have mainstream financial service suppliers, some of which are still on hardware, not able to fail over to sort of redundant applications and keep their service running, obviously is a major impact on the cutting edge fintech businesses, and they need to start catching up.
They do, absolutely, yeah. So if you're in our industry, and as I said, there's a few really great, I guess challenges out there that do a brilliant job, and the obvious ones out there, well, obviously starting Monzo, Revolut, and ourselves, who are really good at what they do. They do auto scaling, they do auto healing. I remember we run up production. Production's running all the time, but we run up dev test environments first thing in the morning, close them down at night, saving all that energy and stuff like that. But things have moved on, even to the point of ensuring, certainly if you're regulated by the PRA, and you're a bank as such, there's a need to try to show regulators that you're not just dependent on one particular supplier for one function. So that goes to cloud suppliers as well. So how do I, how do I not use, if I've gone with AWS, for example, as my principal provider, how do I quickly move to another one if AWS as a company gets too strong or they start putting their prices up? How do I deal with that now?
Or have failure even. I mean, sort of all the cloud providers have had outages, and people don't actually realise that that's actually happened.
Yep.
Do you know Gartner actually produced a report recently, and they actually stated that one of the big issues is sort of vendor lock-in. So it's okay using cloud native, but the more you use, the more you're locked in. And how on earth do you actually port over to another cloud provider if you use all cloud natives capabilities?
Yeah, well, you need to design it in from the start, of course, and knowing that you need to design it in. So it comes back to, look, Donald Rumsfeld, you don't know what you don't know sort of stuff. And that's why it can be useful to use partners in this space if you don't have to do it yourself. So what things should I be thinking of? What things do I need to know on the journey that you need to start thinking? You don't have to. You say like, okay, I'm happy to start with AWS for a period of time. That's okay, but at least make a positive decision about that and go with their containers rather than Kubernetes, for example, or something like that. So what are the decisions that I need to make to provide me with the ability to be portable across different cloud providers?
Well, I think you kind of mentioned it already, haven't you? So, I mean, always building containers. So start with Docker containers for absolutely everything. But I suppose there's part of it which says on the database tier, all the cloud providers provide a database. They use MySQL or use Postgres or Cassandra, well, not all do Cassandra, but certainly Postgres. And so you have to choose carefully that you can actually port, for example, your database from cloud provider to another. The starting point has to be Docker, in my view.
Yeah, agreed. But if you don't know, you don't know, and it's a case of making sure that there's a degree of challenge to the CTO and to the team, the cloud team, the SRE team, or whatever they call it, the DevOps team, depending on what each company calls that team. But are they making the right decisions at the right point in time, and are they aware of the questions they should be asking themselves? Now, you may go down a route that suits you that may not take advantage of portability, which may be fine for you if you're a small company or you're a company that has assessed it and said it's not important to us. But you should at least ask yourself a question.
But you started off this point by saying that actually the regulator's actually looking at this.
They are. So for big banks, they are, yes. So they don't want everybody with one vendor, for example, and it used to be AWS as a default because they used to certainly be seen as the lead cloud company out there. But we're on Google because we think Google provides us with a few features and functions, and certainly where data is concerned, a bit more of an advantage over AWS. But it's a judgment call. I'm not suggesting that's necessarily right, but it's a judgment call we took to be different and to go down a different route.
And as you know, one of the things that we do is we're able to look at the comparative costs between Google, AWS and Azure, but also we can run on all three sort of cloud providers as well. So it sounds like that would be a good proposition for the fintech community.
It is, yeah. So certainly the bigger end of the fintech community, when they're becoming banks or think of becoming banks, or just want to make sure that they're going through the right process of thinking about it and what are the pros and cons of doing that. And lots of it's about ensuring from a regulatory perspective that you've got a degree of autonomy, but also there's a perspective of there's a condition called CISC 8.1, which is material outsourcing. If you've got a vendor out there that has a fundamental part of your business, then you need to add some additional controls and checks over it, and nobody wants to be too reliant upon one particular vendor. And the more important, the more customers you have, or the more money you're looking after, that becomes more and more important. As you can see with all the big banks, nobody thought that the revenue would be quite as big as it is. It's bigger than both Starling ones are put together, of course, and it's not got a banking license, it's got a money license, same as we have. So the fact that it's such a major, any problems with Revolut will have such a major impact on UK customers means that regulators are looking carefully at it as they are with the major banks. So they will need to be thinking about ensuring that there's resilience, redundancy, and all the things that we talked about, and portability across their data centres now.
Of course, you're on GCP at the moment, so what's your sort of thoughts then in providing that kind of resiliency across cloud providers?
So we thought about it, and we've got we've ensured that through our architecture that we can be portable. There's advantages of using some elements of some vendors because of speed and performance and stuff.
Yes.
But you need to just go through the process of what's the right thing to do here. But you need to ask yourself a question. There's features that we'd like to do, and you know far more about this than I will. But stuff that interests me is like reverse auctioning and stuff like that, which we want to be able to move to at some point in time. We're able to do that to a limited extent. Some of our functions and features.
So probably just to be clear, when we talk about sort of reverse auctioning, to the listeners here, so you've got the big cloud providers, and wouldn't it be great to have the ability to say, okay, I want this amount of compute power and these capabilities, this amount of data storage. Who's going to give me the best price and the best terms and conditions? At the moment, if you're tied into one particular cloud vendor, they've kind of got you for life. Whereas what you're talking about, what Ziglu's done, is design in such a way that you can move to different cloud providers.
Yeah.
So that will enable you to basically go to any cloud provider and say, this is what we need. Now, who's going to give me the best deal?
Well, beyond that, arguably, what I'm thinking of is the ability to be able to do that in real time. So
right.
we've just launched a new service. We've got a whole new raft of people coming on. Now, you'll know between around about 8 o'clock in the morning and 9:30, when people sit down at their desks, as banking apps and banking platforms have a lot of activity. People are on the bus, they're on the tube, as you can get right on the tube nowadays. They're checking their balances, they're doing stuff first thing in the morning. Therefore, we're automatically servers are coming up, and it happens automatically. And then it goes down again at 9:30 or so when people sort of are working at their desk, and then at lunchtime it goes up, and at the end of the day as well. So you get these peaks and troughs. But sometimes you want to be able to say, look, actually, I don't want to be spending that money with that vendor. I want to find right now. I've got an hour's worth of compute power I want to do to do some functions. Who's got the best price for me, please? Absolutely. In real time across multiple vendors.
Right, and here's an interesting point. So we've heard the term multi-cloud, but I'm thinking actually we should be using the term multiple clouds, and multi-cloud should be a term reserved for organisations who in real time can actually use multiple cloud vendors. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and that's really hard for people to get their heads around and do. It's a very difficult
technically challenged.
Yeah, it's very difficult to do, and there's not many companies out there that have done that and know how to do that and can help and advise people on how they might do that. But it's but you can see the benefits. You can imagine the benefits if you're a big company, and you've got you're fixed into a contract and it costs you this much. But then if you do some reverse auctioning, so okay, well I want to be able to expand or grow, and I want to be able to do these. I've got certain peaks and troughs which I want to be able to manage. And just go out and on the market and say, like, who's got the best price at that moment in time.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, through AWS and other cloud vendors, you've got things like spot prices and things like that, where you can actually do that relatively dynamically. But I think you're talking about something a bit more sophisticated here. It's not just within one cloud vendor. It's basically saying, I can get this from Azure at this price. What can you do?
Yeah.
Now, does that turn the cloud vendors into a commodity?
Yeah.
So businesses today are looking at their cloud vendors and going, we want to outsource, and but we're not that bothered about all these advanced features. We just want the best compute capability that you can give us at the best price.
Yeah, so it puts the power back in the hand of the technology company or the bank or whoever's using the provider to say, look, we're in charge of this, we're paying you. and we'll make a decision based upon price and
I
service.
haven't heard that much out there at the moment. It sounds like Ziglu's thinking is a little bit ahead of the curve on this one.
Well, yeah, we'd like to think so. As I said, we're a technology company first and foremost, but that means that we can offer resilience, redundancy, and best price and performance. Ultimately means we keep our pricing low for customers.
Yeah, and of course, we've had a few conversations about this kind of thing in the past. Of course, Penta is one of those companies that is looking at multi-cloud in depth, and hopefully at some point in the future, we can collaborate on what that might look like. Such companies like Ziglu and other organisations can in fact say, okay, let's not be locked into these cloud providers. Let's get best price, the best deal we possibly can from them, and break the monopoly.
Yeah, indeed. So that exactly, and I think that's the next stage of growth, of evolution in terms of where we are at the moment. There's still lots of banks, of course. There's still they lots of big vendors, and I won't name the names, but everyone knows who they are in the sort of data center space just before cloud. Sort of late 14s, early 15s, 2015, just before cloud went sort of mainstream as such in terms of financial services, tied big companies into long contracts, like 10, 15, 20-year contracts, something stupid at reduced prices, which might have been appealing at the time for the companies, but now look really expensive. Not only expensive in terms of unit cost, but expensive in terms of the lack of flexibility it affords to the tech teams. To be able to run up environments and testings and spikes and stuff like that, you can't do as readily in a data center environment. So there's a lot of room for growth. With some of those contracts might be 5 years, if they were lucky and coming out in 2020. Some will be, some that they may decide to pay the exit clauses on the contracts. So there'll be some big companies that are thinking of coming out and are
starting their migration to cloud. But we both know that you've built for cloud, cloud native, and the old monolithic applications that get built in traditional data centers, they don't port well.
No,
they don't auto scale. They don't, you don't have the resilience.
This
and actually, it costs more in cloud than in traditional data centers.
Absolutely, and I know a few businesses that have just ported across and said, "Well, my costs have gone up." Well, yeah, they would have gone up because
they're switched on all the time. They're not auto scaling.
Yeah, exactly, and so a lot of thinking needs to occur. You don't just migrate and port stuff across. There's a re-engineering that needs to occur in the process.
Well, that's part of your thinking when you started Ziglu, and probably Starling as well, is that you didn't want to build another generation of legacy.
Well, of course, yeah, obviously. So, but one of the key things that we try and do all the time is keep on top of technical debt. It's an expression that is used a lot in technology, and people are generally quite insincere about what that means. But to everyone out there who may not understand the expression, it's about just making sure that every time you do a release or release some function, anything that's not quite right technically, you try and address, and you try and keep on top of things that you want to improve from a technical perspective. Yeah. So every time we do an iteration, say we do a 2-week iteration, we don't really do iterations as such. We follow sort of a Kanban approach. So it's not really iterations, but we'll come back to Agile and Kanban if you want to do that. But every time we do a release, we do a front-end release, we do a back-end release, we do an infrastructure release, and they can all be separate. But it's important to make sure you pay down debt and you do some stuff to improve things from a technical perspective.
So presumably what you do there is that you reserve a certain amount of capacity purely for paying down technical debt. Yeah. Normally around 20%, is that about right?
Yeah. Maybe a little, 20-25%, would you believe? And if you, thankfully I used to be a CTO, so I know what it means. I know it's important to do. So whilst you can talk to many CEOs of banks and they don't get it, it's probably because of the fact that CEOs of banks aren't around. They do a job for a few years. Their job is to deliver business function and keep customers happy, and they see they're going to be there for a finite period of time, and off they go.
But they're not. But Mark, they're not technologists, are they?
No, and invariably they're not. So if you look at the most successful challenges, they're Tom Monzo used to be CTO at Starling, did my job before me, and technical. and Nikolai's technical. So you look at the key area, the key people who are successful, key banks that are successful, they're run by people who understand technology.
I wonder if we'd actually probably draw that as a sort of a generalism more than anything else. Is, you know, the days are gone when, you know, there was technology in the business. Today, the business is technology, and so you can't separate the two. And of course, as a fintech, you know, you cannot actually separate the business and technology. They are all one thing.
Yeah.
So question here, Mark, for you then, as a CEO of Ziglu and a fintech, then are we actually looking at a new breed of CEOs that who haven't got technical knowledge? They can't be as effective as a CEO.
Well, one of the problems there always used to be, and we've all, you know, I worked at Barclays for a number of years, as you know, and actually when I was at BJSS, I was general manager there, and we worked for, you know, many of the big banks and stuff, and you know, and all the companies and all sorts. There's always this challenge between technology and the business, as it's referred to as big companies, where the business is never happy with technology because it's always expensive, it's always late, it's always, you know, slow, it isn't responsive, and it gives them something that ultimately they, you know, has moved on by the time they deliver it. So it's always been a problem. So how do they overcome that problem? Well, you know, what they ended up doing is certainly front office in many of these, you know, banks, they brought their own technology people in just to get stuff done because they're fed up with technology, and it's not seen as an enabler. But if your company is a technology company first and foremost, then it's all about technology enabling the business. It's intrinsically linked. And the problem that many companies face, many bigger companies face, is that they're separate functions and are pulling in separate directions. And there's little respect and regard for technology in many of the big banks because it's got to a point where it's all legacy. You know, most of the big banks are running on, you know, IBM mainframes of the 60s and stuff, and you know they can't work in.
They're not flexible, are they? They're not an agile business, you know, and they're constrained by their technology. But with the COVID-19 pandemic, those companies, those organisations that are not digital, have really suffered.
Yeah, they have. But thankfully, I can't see it getting any better anytime soon if I'm honest with you. So, you know, whether you're an RBS or you're a Barclays or you're a Nationwide or you're, they've all had different approaches to try to challenge the challenges, and most of them have failed. If you're Barclays, you run up sort of another layer of technology on top of your mainframe to make it appear like it's not batch when we all know it is. But you know, Barclays is pretty good. They've always have been pretty good in terms of their technology. I think Barclays technology team is really good. Actually, I think they're great guys. It's that they've had to do stuff on top of the
They're constrained by their legacy, aren't they?
And they need to grasp the metal. But then, you know, you've had companies like Nationwide try and grasp the metal, and RBS try and grasp the metal in terms of, like, okay, we're going to go to Mambu. Mambu, a great product, by the way. I remember buying them as a bit of an insurance policy when I was at Starling. But ultimately, after spending £100 million each, RBS Bow, Nationwide, another £100 million on their Challenger, both failed. You know, both didn't get to market.
And just thinking back to Barclays just for a minute. So we did a program, didn't we? INET, was it?
Was it?
Yeah. And was it the first one? Let me get this right. So it was the first one to deliver on time, to specification, and under budget.
It was under budget
for 13 years.
Yeah.
How did we do it? I suppose it was an early agile project. Is that how you think of it?
Well, yeah. So in those days at Barclays, it was great. I mean, if you get stuff delivered, you know, I managed to get to quite a level of seniority because just delivering stuff and people like delivery. So getting stuff done, delivering things, keeping the business happy, and focusing on the customer all the time. And we were agile, so we didn't do.
But we did bypass the internal IT a little bit.
And we did, you know, and we did, you know,
we kind of did our own thing.
And we had big vendors back then, of course, that wanted us to work in an agile way, in a waterfall way, and we pushed back hard. And thankfully, we had support from you know, exec and Barclays, and that enabled us to get stuff done.
Very forward-thinking CTO, from what I remember.
Yeah, he was indeed. He was a good guy. Yeah. So that enabled us to get stuff done, and that same culture of delivery is. You know, it's not just about
agile, is it?
No, it's not. It's about the culture of making things happen and getting things done.
And it's a startup culture. It's kind of, you think of it as, you know, you've done Starling and you're doing Ziglu. It's a similar culture, isn't it? Really, it's just getting the job done. That's what it's about. doing what's necessary.
Yeah, and being really trying to make a difference and doing it for the right reasons and working hard and being passionate about what you're doing and how can I get this done quicker and how do I evolve? I mean, we talked earlier about the business and tech in the big banks always being having friction between them because they don't come together and what Agile does over waterfall, as we all know, is bring the business intrinsically into the technology team so that they get to design what they want as it's going along. Not we'll take 6 months or a year to design it, and then we'll take 6 months or a year to build it, and then we'll get another 3 months to implement it.
By the time you're there, the business has changed, doesn't it?
Exactly. So that doesn't work anymore. So small. As you'll see with Ziglu, we've delivered 3 functions in the last week. All of them are MVPs, and all we do is enhance.
It's an incremental process.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is important. So it's robust and reliable. They're great features and functions, but then customers say, what about that? What about that? What about that? And yeah, we know about these things, and we're adding. They're in our roadmap. We're making constant improvements and enhancements. But getting product out and getting value to the business, getting value to our customers, which is our business, is the most important thing.
It's funny. I've had a career in banking. You've had a career in banking. I've done government as well. And it's always been used as an excuse for non-delivery. Is the regulator gets in the way. You've never had the regulator get in the way, have you?
No, the regulator's been. I think the regulators in the UK are fantastic, actually. If I'm honest with you, and I don't want to say that they're just regulated as, but they are. I mean, it was a tough barrier to get over, and it should be. But it's a ridiculous excuse to blame regulators for anything. They're there to do a job, and they do a good job of making sure that everybody operates in the best way. Certainly,
absolutely,
post FSA.
I mean, certainly, with my own career in the government sector, in the SCO, we actually delivered the first cloud solution for UK government, and we got it accredited, and we did ISO 27001, and again we did it on time, on budget, to specification. Yeah, there's a bit of a pattern here, isn't there? Do you think it's culture?
It's obviously it's culture. It's a fundamental thing. I mean, people in banks don't realise that they have to give free rein to the right people to get stuff done, and they will never be able to emulate a startup culture. And you can now see some of the.
Is that some of the failures that you were talking about earlier on? Do you think that was the fundamental issue around those failures? So you mentioned a few of them. I thought a few of the well-known names, they tried to do their own challenges, but did they try and port their old culture into those challenges? Do you think that was what the issue was?
Of course it was. Yeah, I mean, so Bo spent 100 million doing something, and we did it for 5 million starting. That is genuinely the sort of gap in terms of, and that is all bureaucracy, red tape, and culture.
Or was it also large suppliers potentially as well, slowing things down?
Well, exactly. But if your culture is to own things and do things yourself, you don't rely upon large suppliers and the huge costs of bringing in some of the large suppliers. You empower your own people that you pick yourself to do the job. But invariably, why did they pick a third-party provider? Some of these banks to run their core ledger, because they didn't have confidence in their own IT teams to build it themselves, which again is not what the leading companies, the leading fintechs do now.
I mean, obviously you use a lot of open source in your solution.
Totally, yeah.
I remember again in some of the my banking career and yours as well. If we had to use some of the big suppliers, even the procurement process took months. And can you imagine trying to do Ziglu today with some of the large suppliers? Would you be able to deliver what you've delivered up to now?
No, not at all. Because if you're in a big bank, you'll be persuaded to use, let's say, the big vendors out there. And those big vendors are, banks, they want to earn money from you, of course.
Nothing wrong with that at the end of the day.
No, but at extortionate rates sometimes, with a bums on seat approach to doing stuff, rather than how can I efficiently help you to do a job in a way that and really help you through the process of, we talked about the whole cloud vendor estate and stuff like how do you do that, and someone who's a real expert in what they're doing, talking you through a process, pros and cons, and helping you to do it. Now there are vendors out there, of course. I think BJSS was a company that I worked at for a number of years who are great and do that very well. And there's a few others, of course. your company.
Thank you, Mark.
But then there's big companies who it's all a case of bums on seats, and it's not a case of helping you. And in actual fact, they don't know as much as some of the people they're trying to advise sometimes.
So it sounds like, from a supplier perspective, then choosing a supplier that matches your culture is an important factor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So that startup culture, having a startup supplier working with a startup company like yourselves is an essential part.
Yeah, and so the big banks will pick the big vendors, and they get what they deserve.
That's fair enough. So can I be controversial?
Okay.
So the big cloud providers, would you classify them as the big suppliers, the big vendors?
Well, I've not seen, actually, if I'm honest with you, I've not seen them behave that way. If I'm entirely honest, no, they've it's sometimes difficult to get the right people. We had a few problems early on. We've got one or two small issues right now in terms of response times on some of our stuff, our cards. But they're getting back to us relatively quickly.
Yeah.
Not quite as quick as I'd like, if I'm honest with you. But generally they're quite responsive and technically competent, of course, as you'd expect.
So as a set of suppliers, then the cloud providers have learned the lesson from some of the, let's call them the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s suppliers. Yeah. Okay. So they understand your culture, and they are themselves working within that culture.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay. What about the future? What's next for Ziglu?
So we're looking to expand. So just our next sort of 6 months or so is we're launching cards very soon now, which is great. And then we're just rounding out our sort of challenger features and functions in Q4, adding in FX. By the end of the year, we're thinking of a fully feature-rich sort of challenger with FX and crypto, and we're pushing out into Europe in Q4, the States H1 next year, and we're targeting 10 million customers in the next sort of 5 years. So serious about being a major financial services company on a B2C space.
Really good to hear. So one last question, if I may. Mm-hmm. Would you say that you are the next generation challenger, and actually the Starlings and the Monzo are the previous generation?
Well, it's a good question. Okay, they've been really successful. They've changed people's attitudes to their bank for the better. I'm proud of being part of the founding team at Starling, and I think they've done a brilliant job, as of the challenge of the time, changing people's relationship with their bank. But it's 2020, and people have got different needs nowadays. Crypto's going mainstream.
Things have moved on.
Yeah, things have moved on. So if you're going to launch another challenger in 2020, what it looks like Ziglu.
And you've got to have crypto in the mint.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mark, thank you very much for your time. This is Penta Pod, signing off for now, and look forward to the next episode. Thank you for now. Bye.